Hello class, my name is Saria, and today I will be covering the article Language Learner Strategies and Styles by James Pupura. So what will we learn from this article? Well, this article will give us information about strategies language learners use when learning or using a second or foreign language. We'll learn some learner styles and how they relate to learning strategies. Also, research on learner strategies and how this information can be used to inform language teaching and learning. And also how teachers can design tasks to promote strategic awareness and develop cognitive flexibility in their students. Yesterday, while Hal and Anne were at a restaurant, thieves broke down the door of their house, went inside, broke into their safe, and stole Anne's diamond ring. When they got home, the thieves were in the house. Hal grabbed one of them, but he hit Hal and broke his nose. Anne almost had a nervous breakdown. She took Hal to the hospital, but on the way, the car broke down, so they got a cab. When they got home, Anne calculated the cost of the break-in. She felt like breaking out in tears. She was so upset. Hal said, "Gee, we've never spent so much money. We've broken all records." Anne added, "We spent all our money. We're totally broke." Hal replied, "Everything's either broken down, or broken into, but we still love each other. We'll never break up." Okay, this little story at the beginning of the article is a demonstration of teaching in a foreign language class in which students have trouble with the expressions break or break in. Well, the students were given the task to infer what the meanings of the different words were, and when they finished, they got together in groups to compare their answers and verify their choices or clarify what their problems were. Well, verifying and clarifying are strategies commonly used to understand new information. And this is how the students were able to work together and figure out and evaluate what the different expressions meant. Okay, in addition to a learner's knowledge of language and what they want to communicate, to be successful in learning in SFL, one would need to have the ability to plan, ask questions, make associations, remember, prioritize, distinguish main ideas from details, monitor progress, reflect on successes, and flexibly shift their approaches to language or learning use. Basically, these thoughts and actions are learner strategies which are part of strategic competence and are really important when learning and using an SFL. The first one is strategic competence. Strategic competence is the information, structures, and work in memory and long-term memory associated with the brain's information processing system. The strategic strategies are thoughts or behaviors used by learners to regulate their SFL learning or their use. The second one, metacognitive strategies, they mentally regulate actions or behaviors such as planning or talk or monitoring the SFL use. The third, cognitive strategies, are doing behaviors that learners use to understand, remember, retrieve, or use new information. This would be in such things as clarifying, inferring the meaning from context, like we did at the beginning with the word break and break in, categorizing words, and correcting grammar. The third, social strategies, are collaborative behaviors that promote positive interactions and relationships. This would be like in helping or in sharing. And then the fourth, affective strategies. These are behaviors that allow learners to identify and adjust their feelings, beliefs, attitudes, and impulses while they're learning and using an SFL. This would be an example of like coping with frustrations. Okay, now we're going to get to the foundation of the learning strategies. We're going to talk about some of the conceptual underpinnings. First, let's go and discuss what is a good learner. In some of the research that was done earlier on, they felt that if we could understand what successful learners do as opposed to what unsuccessful learners do, we could better address the teaching and learning of an SFL student. So a good language learner would be willing and accurate guessers. They have strong drivers to communicate or learn from communication. They're not inhibited. They focus on communication. They practice. They monitor their own speech, and they attend to meaning. So in regards to learner styles, what kind of language learners are we? Shortly after the researchers began examining the correlation between a good language learner strategies as opposed to a not so good language learner, the researchers noticed that there was a correlation between the learner's success and their general preferred orientation towards learning. So there's several types of learning styles. I'm sure we've all gone through the testing to find out what type of a learner we were. There's perceptual preferences, which covers the auditory, the visual, the kinesthetic. There's personality preferences, which are either extroverted or introverted. And then there's the processing preferences, which could be inductive, deductive, synthetic, analytic, field sensitive, or field insensitive. Okay, since the early work on strategies, there's been a lot of research on the nature of strategic competence itself and its relationship to learning outcomes. Several researchers have proposed taxonomies of strategy use. In her earlier work, Oxford conceptualized strategy use in terms of direct and indirect strategies. The direct strategies included memory strategies, which would be in creating mental images, grouping, applying images or sounds. Also cognitive strategies, which included practicing, repeating, receiving, and sending messages. And compensation strategies, which included guessing, overcoming limitations, and production. The indirect strategies had metacognitive strategies, which centered on learning, arranging and planning learning, evaluating learning. Affective strategies, which dealt with lowering anxiety, self-encouragement, taking one's emotional temperature, things of that sort. And social strategies was with questioning and cooperating and empathizing. Another popular conceptualization strategy use was proposed by O'Malley and Shamat. They defined strategy in terms of metacognitive strategies, which would be attending selectively, planning, goal setting, monitoring, evaluating. Also cognitive strategies, which was rehearsing, repeating, organizing, grouping, classifying, inferencing, summarizing. And social affective strategies, which dealt with cooperating, questioning for clarification, self-talk to reduce anxiety. Okay, now let's talk about information processing. Information processing, it refers to the mental activities that humans engage in as they progress from developing a conceptual understanding of new information to being able to use this information effortlessly and automatically in the correct context. In regards to SLA, information processing, it relates to developmental activities that learners engage in as they're exposed to new linguistic input and as they develop competence to use new language features automatically when they're communicating. Basically, this approach would assume that the new linguistic input would be handled by the cognitive processing system of the brain. And this is where memory plays an important role in the developmental process. In this system information processing, it involves several different types of memory. It has the sensory memory, the short-term memory, the working memory, and the long-term memory. Now, how does this information processing relate to SFL learning? Well, with metacognitive strategy, using this includes strategies designed to assess the situation, monitor, evaluate, and self-test. On the other hand, use of the cognitive strategy, this would involve attending, comprehending, storing, memory and retrieval using, and then with the results of this taxonomy, it was then used to produce Pupura's metacognitive and cognitive strategy use questionnaire, which is an additional processing for SFL learning. So now, how is this applicable in a classroom? What are the classroom applications? Well, first, it raises awareness of learner strategy use. And it does this by use of questionnaires, interviews or written reports, observation by teachers while the students are performing tasks, and the students' verbal reports before, after, or while performing tasks. This promotes strategy awareness by increasing the learner's awareness of and rationale for strategy use in SFL learning. It introduces learners to new strategies and models their use. It gives learners opportunities to use these strategies, and it allows learners to share reflections about strategy and effectiveness. With all this information, the findings from the research that teachers should know is that strategy use correlates with learning success, metacognition is important, and cognitive flexibility is critical. So to sum up, strategic competence can be defined in terms of metacognitive, meta-affective, and meta-sociocultural interactive strategies. The 3 dimensions of strategy use have a differential impact on how learners acquire and use SFLs as they process new input, store and remember new information, and retrieve information to respond and communicate. Learners differ widely in their strategies they use. In fact, strategy use is a function of what is being learned, under what conditions, and with what process constraints. Metacognition is highly correlated with learning success. Learner styles or a person's preferred or habitual ways of learning can affect strategy use and learning outcomes. Therefore, learners need to be aware of their styles so that they can develop style stretching skills for learning and for using an SFL. Learners need to develop a repertoire of effective strategies that can be deployed flexibly in response to the changing conditions of learning and use. And finally, teachers should structure tasks to advance SFL processing and to promote strategy awareness and implementation. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope that you were able to glean some insight as to language learners' strategies and styles. And the discussion questions for this article will be listed below. Thanks again.